Get her out. Call security. The manager's voice cracked like a whip across the marble showroom. Brad Wilson's face flushed crimson as he pointed furiously at the black woman in faded jeans and sneakers standing silently near the entrance of Prestige Motors. Customers turned. Employees froze. But the woman didn't move. She didn't argue. She didn't shout. Her silence was more powerful than any outburst. "You have no idea what you just did," she said softly. Her tone didn't rise. Her voice didn't shake. It was calm, too calm. Her name was Zora Thompson, and she owned the building he was standing in. But Brad didn't know that. Yet. In the next 30 minutes, his entire world and career would collapse. What started as a simple act of discrimination would unravel into a corporate reckoning. And it all began with one fatal mistake. Judging the woman who signs your paycheck. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Zora Thompson didn't just build a business, she built an empire. From her first used car lot in Compton at 25 to a statewide network of 12 luxury dealerships, the Thompson Automotive Group was a symbol of elegance, efficiency, and ethical leadership. When Prestige Motors in Beverly Hills came up for sale, she didn't hesitate. It was prime real estate, platinum-tier clientele, her 12th jewel in the crown. But it didn't feel like hers. Not yet. Within weeks of finalizing the acquisition, Zora began receiving vague warnings, quiet emails from former clients, whispers from other dealerships. Their salespeople treat you differently if you don't look the part. You better wear a Rolex if you want service. Great cars. Weird vibe. At first, she dismissed them. Maybe it was old management. Maybe things would change under her. But then came the voicemail. A black female doctor from Oakland recounted her humiliating visit, how she was ignored while a man in flip-flops and a Rolex got 5-star treatment. Her voice cracked with exhaustion. "I didn't want to say anything. But you seem like the kind of woman who'd want to know." Zora sat in silence for nearly 5 minutes after hearing that. Then she made a decision that would change everything. She wouldn't fire anyone. Not yet. She would walk into her own dealership unannounced, underdressed, and unknown. Not as CEO. As a customer. She would see for herself. So that morning, she opened the back of her closet and pulled out a pair of old jeans, a faded Detroit Hustles Harder t-shirt, and sneakers she hadn't worn since her early startup days. No designer bag. No makeup. Just a ponytail, a phone, and the steel focus of a woman with something to prove. Instead of her usual Tesla or Bentley, she took her 2015 Honda Civic. It was dusty, unpolished, the kind of car most of her showroom staff wouldn't even glance at. And that was the point. When Zora pulled into the valet circle at Prestige Motors, she could already feel eyes on her. But no one moved. No valet came to greet her. She parked herself in the far corner tucked between 2 monstrous SUVs, then stepped out and walked slowly toward the glass double doors. The lobby gleamed. Marble floors reflected sunlight like diamonds. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead like frozen rainstorms. Cars, Ferraris, McLarens, Aston Martins stood like silent sentinels roped off with gold velvet lines. Every inch of the space screamed wealth and exclusivity. And Zora might as well have been invisible. She stood inside the entrance for 2 full minutes. 3 salesmen passed her. One made eye contact, then turned away. Another adjusted his blazer and greeted a white couple who had just walked in behind her. No hello. No offer of coffee. No acknowledgement at all. 3 minutes. She timed it. 3 minutes of standing still like a ghost while the people who worked for her, paid by her, walked past her like she didn't exist. A young receptionist finally looked up. Jessica. Blonde curls. Immaculate makeup. AirPods in. Without greeting, without even a smile, Jessica spoke like she was swatting a fly. "If you're here about a job, applications are online." Zora blinked. She felt her breath catch for just a moment. "Actually, I'm interested in purchasing a vehicle." Jessica's eyes flicked over her again. The tone sharpened. "Honey, our cheapest car is 40 grand. You might want to try the used lot down the street." There it was. Dismissal, syrupy, and vicious. Zora kept her expression blank. "Thank you," she said. But inside, her blood was beginning to simmer. Then Brad Wilson entered. Slicked hair, Italian suit, a practiced smirk. He crossed the floor like a man who believed gravity bent to him. From the corner, he had been watching the interaction. Now he approached, nodding to Jessica, before turning his patronizing smile toward Zora. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding." He didn't ask for her name, didn't ask what brought her in, just assumed there was a problem, and she was it. But Zora held her ground. "I'd like to look at your luxury sedans." Brad paused. Something shifted in his smile, like he was tightening a leash. "Those require serious buyers with pre-approved financing." "Do you have proof of funds today?" Zora stared at him. The air between them was heavy with the weight of assumptions. "I'd just like to look," she said evenly. Brad turned his head slightly, then nodded to the security guard. "Tom, would you mind standing by just in case?" Zora felt the room freeze. She wasn't being escorted. Not yet. But she was being watched like a thief. And for a woman who built her entire life on earning respect, this was the lowest insult imaginable. Still, she wasn't done. Not even close. Zora stood still for a beat. She had built dealerships with class charm and competence. Her staff were supposed to be trained in emotional intelligence, cross-cultural etiquette, and the principle that everyone deserved respect. Now here she was, on the receiving end of everything her policies were designed to prevent. She stepped slowly toward the vehicle that had caught her eye, a black-on-black BMW 7 Series, sleek, imposing, and elegant. The price tag read $85,000. Zora traced her hand gently across the paint. And that's when Brad snapped. His shoes clicked hard against the floor as he stormed over like a nightclub bouncer ready to break up a fight. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see 3 forms of ID and recent bank statements if you want to keep touching the merchandise." Zora's fingers paused mid-air. The voice wasn't firm. It was threatening. Customers turned. One laughed awkwardly. Jessica behind the front desk smirked into her computer screen like she was watching her favorite drama unfold. Zora looked around the showroom. Not one person intervened. She took a breath. "I didn't ask for a test drive. I'm simply admiring the car. You've admired it long enough." Brad cut in, raising his voice now. "Tom?" The security guard, Tom, appeared like a trained dog. His stance was wide, his eyes already cold. Brad didn't whisper this time. He didn't care who heard. "Stand by. I don't want a situation on the floor." Zora turned toward Tom slowly. "You think I'm a threat?" "No, ma'am." Tom replied quickly. "But Mr. Wilson asked me to, of course," she said. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. But every syllable held steel. It didn't matter. Because just then, the doors opened again, and everything changed. A man walked in. White, mid-40s, expensive gray suit, Rolex glinting on his wrist. He carried himself like he belonged in a showroom full of 6-figure toys. Jessica saw him first and jumped to her feet like she'd been electrocuted. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to Prestige Motors." Her voice, icy, just moments before now, flowed like honey. The sales team stirred like ants around sugar. Zora watched the transformation. The man was immediately offered a beverage, a chair, a tour of the showroom. No ID required. No questions about financing. No security guard shadowing his every move. The man pointed toward the same BMW Zora had touched. A salesman practically ran to grab the keys. "Would you like to sit inside? Sir, start it up?" "Take it for a spin." Zora's jaw clenched. This wasn't unconscious bias. This wasn't subtle. This was protocol. Brad turned back to her. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable at one of our other locations." That pause. Other locations. The code for places that serve people like you. It was segregation disguised as service. Discrimination wrapped in a smile. Still, Zora didn't move. "I'd like to finish looking," she said. That's when Tom did something unforgivable. He reached for her arm. "Let's go," he said. "Time to leave." The grip was rough. Zora yanked her arm free. Don't touch me." Her voice didn't rise, but something in it stopped everything. Even the white customer being pampered across the room turned his head. Brad leaned in, close eyes burning. "And don't come back unless you can actually afford to shop here." Zora stared at him. This man who worked for her was now verbally ejecting her from a dealership she owned. She took one step toward the exit, then paused, turned, and smiled. Not a kind smile, not a forgiving smile. It was the smile of a storm that knew it was about to destroy everything in its path. "Oh, I'll be back very soon." Then she walked out. The entire showroom watched in silence. And just like that, the woman they thought they had humiliated had just begun writing their obituary. Zora sat in the driver's seat of her Honda Civic, staring through the windshield. Her hands weren't trembling from shame. They were vibrating with a silent fury, the kind that doesn't explode, but erupts with precision. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. She didn't answer it. Instead, she opened the voice recorder app and pressed rec. Then she turned the camera forward and let it roll. Inside the glass walls of Prestige Motors business resumed like nothing had happened. The salesman was laughing with the white customer who now sat behind the wheel of the BMW Zora had been denied access to. Jessica was twirling a pen between manicured fingers, chatting with another employee. Brad stood near the reception desk, relaxed, smiling, sipping coffee like he'd just triumphed. Zora's eyes narrowed. She wasn't done documenting. And then, as if the universe needed to confirm her worst fears, another car pulled up beside hers. A black Mercedes GLE, sleek and spotless. A young black woman stepped out, maybe late 20s, tailored navy blue suit, iPad in hand, confident stride, the kind of presence that whispered success without screaming it. Zora's breath caught. Not again. Not her too. She sat back and watched camera still recording. The woman later she'd learn her name was Jennifer, walked in posture, tall, smile, courteous. But Zora already knew what would happen. It was a script, and she'd just lived the first act. Jessica barely looked up. No greeting. No acknowledgement. Jennifer approached the same reception desk Zora had stood at 20 minutes earlier. And it happened again. The same tone. The same look. The same slow, poisoned pause. Zora leaned closer to the steering wheel. She could read Jessica's lips. Applications are online. Zora closed her eyes. She felt the burn behind them, not of sadness, but of confirmation. Cold, ruthless confirmation. She clicked on her earpiece and dialed one number. Sarah picked up immediately. "Zora, they failed." Zora set her voice low and even, spectacularly. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then Sarah said, "Do you want to begin?" Protocol 7. Zora didn't hesitate. "It's worse than we thought. Initiate it." She ended the call. Protocol 7 wasn't a policy. It was a code red reserved for extreme violations of corporate values. It meant full audits, legal mobilization, termination authority transferred directly to the executive team. It meant war. Inside the dealership, Jennifer had now approached Brad. He hadn't even changed his tone. Same fake grin. Same patronizing stance. The same little gestures, subtle but demeaning, that Zora had just endured. Zora's phone buzzed again. This time, she picked up. "Legal is ready. HR is looped in. Do you want regional leadership present?" Zora answered. "Get Robert Chen. Tell him it's urgent. He's going to want to be here in person." As she watched, Jennifer gestured toward the same BMW. Brad's smile tightened just like it had with her. He raised a brow, said something Zora couldn't hear, but she could tell by Jennifer's posture, the slight shift, the flicker of disbelief in her expression, that he'd just questioned her ability to buy the car. Zora's jaw clenched. It wasn't just her. It wasn't personal. It was policy. It was practice. It was embedded. And that made it systemic. Zora pressed stop on her recorder. She clicked over to her messages and typed 8 words that would change the lives of everyone inside that showroom. Prepare the paperwork. We're cleaning house. All of it. Then she got out of the car. Not yet to return. not yet to reveal, but to document, to preserve the proof. Because the next time she walked through those doors, she wouldn't be wearing sneakers. She'd be wearing power, and heads would roll. 30 minutes later, the glass doors of Prestige Motors whispered open once more. But this time, the woman who entered was not invisible. Zora Thompson stepped across the marble floor in 4-inch stilettos, each click of her heel a declaration. Gone were the worn sneakers. Gone was the faded t-shirt and soft denim. Now she was regal dressed in a midnight blue power suit, cut to perfection. Her blouse shimmered subtly in the chandelier light, and a diamond brooch shaped like a steering wheel adorned her lapel. Even her posture was different. Shoulders straight, chin, high presence, undeniable. A hush fell over the lobby. Some customers turned not because they recognized her, but because they felt something. Some people carry money. Zora carried command. Jessica looked up and blinked. Something about this woman made her sit up straighter, but the connection hadn't clicked yet. Brad, now seated at the desk scrolling through emails, didn't even glance up. Zora walked directly to the reception counter. "I'd like to speak with your district manager," she said. Her voice was smooth, measured. Jessica faltered. Who should I say is asking?" Zora smiled. It wasn't warm. "Tell him Zora is here." Jessica blinked twice, confused. "Zora." "He'll know." That was all. Jessica hesitated, then picked up the phone. Across the showroom, Brad finally looked up. He saw Zora elegant, poised formidable, and did a double take. The face was familiar, but he couldn't place it. His ego refused to believe it could be the same woman he had dismissed an hour earlier. He stood up and approached. "Excuse me, ma'am, we've already had a situation today. If this is about what happened earlier, I really don't think." Zora turned her head. The ice in her gaze nearly stopped his breath. "I'm not here to think, Mr. Wilson. I'm here to observe." Brad's eyebrows twitched. Observe. But before he could launch another line of condescension, Robert Chen, the regional manager, came bursting through the entrance like a man running from a fire. His suit jacket was crumpled. His forehead glistened with sweat despite the air conditioning. His phone was still in his hand as he scanned the showroom with wild eyes. And when he saw Zora, he froze. The phone slipped to his side. His face went pale. His lips parted, but no words came out. "Miss Thompson," he finally whispered, just above a breath. Jessica looked from Robert to Zora, back to Robert. "Wait." Miss Thompson. Brad, still holding on to his last thread of arrogance, stepped between them. "Thompson." "Wait. How do you know this troublemaker?" The words hung in the air like poison. Troublemaker. Robert visibly winced. Zora didn't move, but her expression changed. Not anger. Worse. Disappointment. She tilted her head just slightly and looked Brad straight in the eye. "That's what you think I am." "A troublemaker." Brad flinched. I just meant." She cut him off with 3 words. "Tell him, Robert." Robert Chen swallowed hard, then took a deep breath. "Brad, this is Zora Thompson. The Zora Thompson. She owns Prestige Motors. She owns 12 dealerships across the state. She's the CEO of Thompson Automotive Group." Silence. The kind of silence that hurts. The kind that's loud in your ears, in your throat, in your ribs. Brad's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. His hands twitched at his sides. "No, that can't be. She was in here earlier." And Zora stepped forward. In what Brad blinked. She didn't let him answer. In clothes you thought meant poor. In a car you assumed meant unimportant. In skin that told you not worthy, Brad's face turned ash gray. "I didn't." "Yes, you did." Her voice didn't rise, but it hit like thunder. Brad Wilson stood paralyzed, his mouth dry, palms damp, eyes blinking like a man waking up in the middle of a nightmare, but still refusing to believe it. Zora didn't flinch. She turned slowly, letting the room catch up. Customers stopped mid-conversation. A mother with her teenage son paused near the Mercedes display. Even the man who'd been given the BMW keys leaned forward slightly, sensing something seismic had just shifted. Zora reached into the inner pocket of her blazer. Her hand moved deliberately. And when she pulled out the small rectangle of cardstock, she didn't throw it. She didn't flash it. She placed it. Flat on the front counter. With the kind of precision a judge might use when laying down a verdict. A soft tap against marble. It echoed louder than any yell. Jessica's eyes dropped to the business card first, then widened. She took a sharp breath in. Brad leaned forward, frowning, squinting. And there it was. Zora Thompson, Chief Executive Officer Thompson. Automotive Group. No titles, no frills, just facts. "I'm Zora Thompson," she said, her voice low but absolute. "And I own this dealership." The silence that followed was monumental. It was the sound of every assumption, every bias, every ounce of arrogance in that room shattering like glass. Jessica stepped back. Brad laughed. But it wasn't real. It was that twitchy cornered animal laugh, the kind that says, "If I laugh, maybe this goes away. Come on, this is some kind of joke, right? I mean, you can't." Zora raised one brow. Brad turned to Robert. "Tell her, this can't be serious." I didn't know Robert didn't say a word. He simply nodded. A slow, heavy nod that looked like it cost him something. Zora turned, addressing everyone, now staff and customers alike. "For the last hour, I walked through this dealership in clothes that didn't scream wealth, in a car that didn't turn heads, and I was ignored, dismissed, talked down to, and physically escorted out of my own business." Why her voice didn't waver? Because I didn't look like someone who belonged here. A few salespeople shifted uncomfortably because I wasn't wearing a Rolex or Gucci shoes. A young customer whispered to his father, "She owns this place." The father just nodded, eyes fixed forward. Zora's voice lowered sharp as a scalpel now. "Let me be clear. This is not about poor service. This is about systemic disrespect. You judged a book not just by its cover, but by its color." Jessica swallowed hard. Brad's face turned red, then pale, then red again. "I believe in second chances," Zora continued, "but only when people show they're worth the investment." She turned to Robert. "How many complaints have been filed here in the last 6 months?" Robert hesitated. Zora didn't blink. 18, he said. "That we know of." "And how many were investigated properly?" Silence. Zora shook her head. "This is not just a leadership failure, it's a moral failure. And I will not allow this culture to infect my brand." Then came the kill shot. She turned back to Brad. "You humiliated me. You threatened me. You physically had me removed. And worse, you did it with pride." Brad's lips parted, but no sound came. Zora stepped forward. Each heel strike landing like a verdict. "You are no longer employed by this company. Effective. Immediately." Gasps rippled through the room. One of the junior salesmen dropped his iPad. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. Brad stumbled back. You can't." Zora didn't raise her voice. "Oh, but I can." She turned to Tom, the security guard. "You're dismissed. Permanently. You put your hands on a woman who had done nothing but exist in this space. You failed the simplest test of human decency." Tom opened his mouth to object, then thought better of it. He lowered his gaze and stepped back. Jessica, trembling now, tried to slide behind the counter. Zora's eyes locked on her. "You knew exactly what you were doing when you looked at me and said, 'Honey, try the used lot.' You're done." Jessica whispered, "Please." Zora nodded. "I'll remember that whisper." The air inside Prestige Motors had turned electric. What was once a luxury showroom had transformed into a silent courtroom, and Zora Thompson had just dropped the gavel 3 times. Brad stood slack-jawed. Fired. Jessica sank behind the counter, her face flushed, lip quivering. Fired. Tom had already slipped off his earpiece, his broad shoulders sagging as he turned toward the exit. Fired. The ripple that followed wasn't just emotional, it was structural. The staff who remained, the other salespeople, the finance manager, the floor supervisor, stood at attention like soldiers waiting to see if they were next. Robert Chen remained still. He'd worked with Zora for 5 years. He knew what came next. She didn't act out of emotion. She acted out of principle. Zora turned slowly toward the stunned sales team. Let me be perfectly clear. This is not a witch hunt. This is a reckoning. The room didn't breathe. If you stood silent while your colleagues humiliated customers, you are complicit. If you laughed, ignored, or pretended not to notice, start cleaning out your desks now. Nobody moved. Zora scanned each face. Some looked ashamed. Some looked terrified. A few looked finally aware. The showroom doors opened again. Another customer had walked in, an older couple in business attire. They paused at the threshold, feeling the tension. The husband raised a brow. The wife clutched her purse tighter. Zora stepped forward. "Welcome to Prestige Motors," she said. Her voice was calm, professional, controlled. "We're undergoing a culture reset. Please give us a few minutes." The couple nodded and stepped to the side. Even they understood something important was happening here. Robert finally cleared his throat. "Zora," he said cautiously, "HR is already preparing documents. Legal's on standby." Zora nodded. "Good. I want a full incident report by end of day. And I want every employee at this location reviewed, not just for customer complaints, but for how they treat each other. Toxicity doesn't start at the customer level. It starts from within." She turned to the nearest sales associate. His name tag read, "Evan." "How long have you worked here, Evan?" 6 months, ma'am." "Did you witness what happened earlier?" Evan swallowed hard. "Yes. And what did you do?" Evan looked down. "Nothing. I didn't know what to say. And now I know I should have said something." Zora nodded slowly. "You're not fired." Evan exhaled sharply. "But you are now on probation. Everyone is. Until further notice." The weight of that decree hit the team like a thunderclap. Zora walked to the center of the showroom floor. The sunlight from the windows caught the diamonds on her brooch, throwing sharp sparkles across the floor like stars colliding. She turned to face the room, and the moment became a statement. "This business was built on respect," she said. "Not just for the wealthy, not just for the white, not just for the polished. For every single person who walks through that door, from the janitor to the billionaire, because you don't know who people are until you give them a chance to show you. You judged my clothes, my car, my skin, and now you'll be judged by your actions." The other customers now watched silently. Even the BMW client from earlier had stepped away from the vehicle and stood near the lounge, arms crossed, visibly impressed. Robert Chen took a cautious step forward. "What do you want us to do next?" Zora didn't hesitate. "Start a full retraining protocol, mandatory for every employee across all 12 locations. New customer service scripts. New interview criteria. Diversity and inclusion workshops, third-party audited. And I want customer feedback surveys launched immediately. Anonymous. Direct to my executive dashboard." Robert nodded and began scribbling notes furiously on his tablet. Zora wasn't done. "From now on, no customer will be judged on their outfit, their accent, or their income bracket. We sell cars. We don't sell arrogance." There was a quiet cheer from the far end of the room. It was Jennifer. She had stayed unseen, uncertain. Now she stepped forward. "Ma'am," she said softly, "I saw what you did." Zora turned to her and smiled genuinely for the first time that day. "You shouldn't have had to. And I promise you, you won't again." Zora's phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. Because in that moment, nothing outside those glass walls mattered more than what she was rebuilding inside them. Redemption wasn't just a concept, it was a plan, and it was already in motion. "Sarah," she said into her Bluetooth earpiece, "push the internal memo to all locations." Subject line, Protocol 7, Activated CEO Directive. On the other end, her assistant responded instantly. "Yes, ma'am. I've flagged HR, legal, and communications. The board will be briefed in 30 minutes. Zora turned her attention back to the staff. "Listen carefully," she said, voice slicing through the tension like a scalpel. "We're not just cleaning up a single store, we're disinfecting the entire system." Her eyes swept across the room from the frightened intern near the finance office to the seasoned floor manager who hadn't spoken once. This wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a pattern, one that ends today. Then she walked over to the dealership's digital display, a giant touchscreen in the center of the floor used for showcasing models' performance specs and financing plans. She tapped a few times, then turned it into a bulletin board. Effective immediately, she said all employees will complete a new 3-tier retraining protocol. Tier 1 Racial Equity Training. Tier 2 Customer Empathy Immersion. Tier 3 Character Judgment Simulations. She turned to Robert. I want outside firms overseeing every phase. This won't be in-house. No watered-down checklists, no fake compliance. And I want hidden audits, actual testers coming in weekly for 6 months. Robert nodded. Understood. The floor supervisor finally found his voice. Ma'am, are we all being investigated? Zora answered without blinking. No. You're being evaluated. Your jobs, your careers, and your reputations now depend not on who you know, but on how you treat strangers. There was no malice in her tone. Just truth. The same kind that had exposed everything. Zora took a breath and walked over to Jennifer, who had remained at the edge of the room, watching, still unsure if she should even be here. You came in today looking to celebrate something, didn't you? Jennifer nodded, a bit stunned. Promotion. My first C-suite role. Zora smiled. A real one. And instead, you got a masterclass in humiliation. Jennifer gave a half laugh, half sigh. Honestly, yeah. Zora extended her hand. Then let me flip that lesson. Come with me. She led Jennifer back to the BMW that had sparked the original conflict. The car still gleamed under the spotlight, its surface flawless, but now it carried something more, a legacy. Zora turned to the remaining floor staff. Who wants to show this customer the full features of this vehicle? Nobody moved at first. Then Evan, the junior associate who had admitted his silence earlier, stepped forward. I would, ma'am. If she'll let me. Jennifer nodded slowly. Zora smiled again. Good. She's buying today. Jennifer blinked. Wait, what? The car is yours. At employee cost. I'm covering the rest, not as a favor, but as a corrective measure. Because you deserved to be treated like a VIP. And we failed you. Tears welled up in Jennifer's eyes, but she composed herself. Thank you. That means more than you know. Zora turned back to the entire room. Let this be the standard. From this moment on, every sale must honor the story of the person standing in front of you. Not the car they drive, not the clothes they wear. The story. She paused. If you can't do that, you don't belong here. A slow clap began in the corner. Not sarcastic, not forced. It was the customer with the BMW keys, the one who had witnessed the discrimination, but said nothing. Now he walked over, extended his hand. Ma'am? I've never seen leadership like that. You just turned a disaster into a transformation. Zora shook his hand, her grip firm. That's what real customer service should look like. It's not about a smile. It's about substance. Zora stood alone in the conference room on the second floor of Prestige Motors, looking out over the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling glass. Below her, the dealership buzzed with quiet recovery staff whispering new customers cautiously walking through the doors and Jennifer finalizing paperwork for her new BMW. But up here, the wait felt different. Her phone buzzed again. 4 missed calls, 2 voicemails, 1 text, all from the same name, Jonathan Eastman, board chair. Zora exhaled slowly. She knew this was coming. She tapped to return the call. Jonathan answered on the second ring. Zora. Jonathan. I just saw the report. Fired the manager receptionist and head of security. In front of customers, correct. A pause. Heavy. And broadcast the firings across internal comms. They violated everything this company stands for. Zora. I'm not questioning your integrity. I'm questioning your strategy. Zora braced herself against the glass. Say what you mean, Jonathan. The shareholders are spooked. Prestige Motors is our highest margin asset. You walked in and detonated the leadership in broad daylight. Because that leadership was rotten. You could have done it quietly. Quiet didn't teach anyone anything. Jonathan didn't speak for a moment. Then, you may have done the right thing, Zora. But was it the smart thing? Zora's jaw clenched. That question meant a challenge woke something deeper in her. Let me ask you something, Jonathan. What's the cost of silence? If I walked out that door and let them keep humiliating customers who looked like me, what would the press say when it finally leaked? What would the class action lawyers say? Jonathan sighed. You're right. Ethically. Legally. But we're getting pressure. Prestige's client list includes celebrities' legacy families. They're watching. I don't care if they're watching. I care if they're learning. Silence again. Zora softened slightly. I didn't start Thompson Automotive to be another luxury brand that sells chrome and leather. I built it to stand for something. Respect. Access. Dignity. Jonathan's tone lowered. And that's why we trust you. But we're at a crossroads. Media's asking for comment. Social's on fire. If we frame this wrong, then help me frame it right, Zora said firmly. Let's not hide from this. Let's lead with it. Acknowledge the mistake. Show the fix. Define the new culture. Turn the scandal into a standard. Jonathan paused again. This time longer. Then, finally, I'll have PR draft a release. You'll need to approve it within 3 hours. Done. And Zora. Yes, whatever this becomes. Just don't burn out proving your point. Zora ended the call. She stood there for a few seconds longer. That's when her assistant Sarah entered, holding a stack of folders. We've had 5 job resignations come in since the announcement, Sarah said, and over 24 emails from other branches. What kind of emails mixed? Some are grateful, some scared, a few angry. Zora took the stack. Good. That means they're awake. Sarah hesitated. Do you think we overstepped? Zora flipped through a resignation letter from a district finance officer who'd worked at a sister dealership for 12 years. He had written, I don't feel comfortable working under a leadership that weaponizes customer experiences as secret tests. Zora read it twice, then folded the letter neatly and set it aside. If truth feels like a weapon, maybe you shouldn't be in battle. Sarah smiled faintly. Zora walked back to the window. Below, Jennifer was getting into her new car. The junior salesman, Evan, opened the door for her with a newfound grace. Zora watched silent. This wasn't about optics. This was about legacy. And legacies aren't made in quiet corners. They're made in public storms by those willing to take the lightning. The following morning, Prestige Motors looked the same on the outside. The sun reflected off the curved glass, the flag fluttered beside the Bentley logo, and the cars in the showroom still gleamed like polished sculpture. But inside, something had shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't declared in neon. But it was there. The silence that had filled the dealership the day before was now replaced by a different kind of quiet, not fear, but focus. Evan, the youngest on the sales team, arrived 20 minutes early. He straightened every chair in the customer lounge, wiped down the touchscreens, refilled the bottled water fridge without being asked. Jessica's replacement, a temp named Rosa, stood at the front desk. Her hair was natural, her nails short, and her smile honest. She greeted each person who walked through the door, not with that tired fake polish, but with attention. Welcome to Prestige Motors, she said to an older man in a baseball cap and cargo pants. Let me know how I can assist you today. He looked startled. Just browsing. That's perfectly fine. Coffee's fresh, and the lounge is yours. No pressure, no sizing up, just hospitality. In the corner office where Brad had once ruled the blinds were open. The space was empty now, just a desk, a chair, and a whiteboard that had been erased clean. Metaphor or accident, it didn't matter. It felt like a cleansing. Robert Chen arrived late, not his usual style. But last night had weighed heavy. He approached Zora's temporary desk set up just outside the executive suite. They're calling this the Thompson Purge, he said, offering a news clipping on his phone. Socials calling it bold. Some calling it tyrannical. Zora didn't even look up. Let them call it what they want, but every customer who walks through these doors will call it fair. Robert nodded, then paused. You think it'll last only if we reinforce it. Zora closed her laptop. Where's the file on legacy complaints pulled? We've got data going back 6 years. I flagged 213 entries where customer appearance or income assumption were noted internally. Zora scanned the list. So many names, so many missed chances. She pointed to one entry dated 3 years ago, a man named Curtis Lane. This one. Do we still have contact info? Robert checked. He's in the system. Former client. Walked out after being asked to provide proof of funds before test driving a used Porsche. Zora paused. Call him. Today. What should I say? That we owe him something. A few hours later, the doors opened again. A familiar figure stepped in tall gray at the temples, wearing the same black boots and leather jacket as the day he was denied his test drive. Curtis Lane. His eyes scanned the room, where Rosa greeted him first. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome back. Back, he asked, brow raised. We're honored to have you. Curtis looked around. The floor felt different. The staff looked different, not just in race or age and posture, in how they watched him without judging. Zora stepped forward. Mr. Lane, I'm Zora Thompson. He blinked. I know who you are. Then you know why I'm standing here. He smiled. I saw the video. Then you saw the truth. I saw something better, he said. I saw someone do something about it. Zora gestured toward the row of cars. If you're still in the market, I'd like to personally show you the new Porsche series. Curtis chuckled. No ID check this time. Only check we do now, Zora replied, is how we made you feel when you walked in. Curtis extended his hand. Zora took it. The handshake wasn't just a welcome back. It was a contract, unwritten but ironclad. Trust restored. By the third day, the surface looked calm. Customers were returning. Sales slowly ticked back up. A local reporter even praised Prestige Motors in a morning op-ed. Finally, a luxury brand that cares more about character than couture. But beneath the calm, Zora had launched something deeper, something silent, something devastating. She called it Operation Mirror. The goal wasn't just to fix behavior, it was to reveal the truth behind it. I want every customer interaction from the last 2 years reviewed, Zora instructed her analytics team. Pull audio transcripts, financing notes. Redact names. Focus on patterns. The tech lead raised an eyebrow. That's over 13,000 entries. Then you'd better start now. What they found made her stomach twist. It wasn't just Brad and Jessica. It wasn't just Beverly Hills. There were dozens of locations from Santa Monica to Scottsdale where casual profiling had become standard. Zora scrolled through phrases pulled from customer comments and staff notes. Didn't look serious. Asked if they could afford the monthly. Suggested economy models before luxury. Escorted to used car division. She leaned back in her chair, hands folded tightly. This wasn't an incident. It was a culture. And we built it, she whispered to herself, because the truth was hard. Zora hadn't just inherited these practices, some of them had grown under her leadership. Not by intention, but by neglect. She had trusted too many middle managers to do the right thing without checking if they knew what the right thing even looked like. The next meeting was scheduled for 3:00 p.m. Internal compliance, legal, PR, security. All seated. Zora stood at the head of the table. A massive flat screen behind her displayed the title, Operation Mirror. Phase 1 findings. She clicked the remote. Slide 1. Complaint. Clusters by race and appearance. Red dots spiked across dealerships near affluent neighborhoods. Slide 2. Staff behavior trends. A staggering overlap between low-value treatment and non-white customers in casual attire. Slide 3. Promotion histories. 82% of store managers had been promoted internally from sales, often without D&I training. Zora paused. We failed. Not once. Not randomly. Repeatedly. Systematically. The room was silent. Even Robert Chen, usually composed, looked winded. Zora clicked again. Slide 4. Unresolved complaints with lawsuit risk. It hit like a punch. 37 complaints across 12 locations, all involving similar patterns, all ignored or quietly buried. Legal, I need assessments on these by end of week. If we're going to face them, we face them head on. The compliance officer, a soft-spoken woman named Mira, finally spoke. Ms. Thompson, Should we notify the board? Not yet, but prepare a package and add a proposal for external review. Zora turned off the screen, then looked each executive in the eye. We sell machines that move people, but somewhere along the way, we forgot how to move people ethically. She stepped out of the boardroom without waiting for applause. Outside, her assistant, Sarah, handed her a file. You asked for past employees who quietly resigned after complaints. Zora flipped through the list, then stopped at one name, Amari Caldwell. She remembered her. A gifted young saleswoman from Atlanta. Top 3 in regional revenue for 2 quarters. Resigned with a 1-sentence letter. This environment no longer reflects my values. Zora had assumed it was personal. Now she realized it had been prophetic. Find her, Zora said. I want to talk to her. Sarah blinked. Hire her back. Zora's answer was razor sharp. No, I want her to help rebuild us. It had been 18 months since Amari Caldwell walked away from the Thompson Automotive Group. She didn't slam doors, didn't rant on social media. She simply typed 10 words in her resignation email. This environment no longer reflects my values. I resign. Respectfully. And vanished. No exit interview, no goodbye lunch. Just gone. But today, Zora was bringing her back. The invitation had been short. Direct Amari, I need you. It's time to fix what we both saw. Come home. ZT Zora didn't know if she'd respond. But at 9:05 a.m. the next morning, a black Tesla pulled into the Beverly Hills lot. The passenger door opened, and Amari stepped out. No flashy entrance, no designer suit. Just sleek black pants, a fitted blazer, and that same quiet fire in her eyes. Zora stood waiting outside the dealership. She extended her hand. Amari shook it firm, unblinking. You look the same, Zora said. You don't, Amari replied. You look like someone who finally stopped tolerating. Zora smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Come inside. There's work to do. They went upstairs, not to a conference room, but to the empty manager's office where Brad's nameplate had been removed. Zora closed the door behind them. Before I say anything, she began, I owe you something. An apology. A platform. Zora handed Amari a folder. Inside were files from Operation Mirror statistics transcripts, video stills. Amari flipped through them, slowly nodding. So it wasn't just me? No. And you want me to help clean it up? Zora didn't flinch. I want you to rebuild it. Amari sat down. What do I get? Complete autonomy. A new title, VP of Culture and Equity Systems. That's not a title I've heard before. It didn't exist. Until you walked back in. Amari leaned forward. I have conditions. Say them. This isn't just about hiring more diverse faces. It's about reprogramming behavior. Agreed. We can't fix this with memos or half-day seminars. So, what do you propose? Amari slid a document across the desk. It was only 2 pages, but the title made Zora raise an eyebrow. Frontline Reset, Rebuild from the Bottom. This is your plan. Every manager, every VP, every district executive, they go undercover, 7 days, as salespeople, receptionists, test drivers. No title, no privilege. You want my leadership team to go undercover at their own stores? Yes. Let them feel what it's like to be judged on appearance, accent, skin. And if they push back, then they've proved they're not fit to lead the culture you're trying to create. Zora looked down at the proposal again. Phase 1, 7-day immersion per region. Phase 2, anonymous feedback from real customers. Phase 3, public reflection from each executive posted internally. Zora looked up. You want them to confess, I want them to transform. And if they fail, then we replace them with people who won't. Zora leaned back, impressed. Amari had not come back meek. She had come back with a blueprint for justice. What do you call this whole initiative? The same thing I called it in my head 18 months ago, which is Project Oxygen. Why Amari's voice softened? Because when a culture is toxic, the first thing people stop doing is breathing. Zora didn't say anything for a full minute. Then she stood, walked to the window, and stared down at the street. The city moved on, unaware of the battle being fought in that glass office. You'll need a team, Zora said finally. Already recruiting. Budget flexible. Authority. Amari stood, met her eyes. Absolute. Zora nodded. Then let's give this company its first deep breath. They shook hands again, but this time it wasn't a reunion. It was a revolution. Calvin Brody wasn't nervous. At least that's what he told himself when he walked into the dealership in Culver City, wearing khakis, a navy polo, and shoes without his signature shine. No Rolex, no district badge, no assistant. He looked ordinary. That was the point. This was day one of Frontline Reset, and Calvin was the first high-level executive to be dropped into the undercover immersion, assigned to shadow as a junior associate. No one in the store knew who he really was, except Zora and Amari, and both of them were watching. From across the city, from every camera in that store. Let's see how the system treats its own when the titles disappear, Zora had said. Calvin walked up to the front desk. A 20-something receptionist named Hannah looked up half distracted. You the new guy from training? Yeah. Calvin, he said, extending a hand. Go find Nate. He's your floor lead. Don't talk to customers unless he says so. No welcome, no onboarding. Just a look that said, you're in the way. Calvin bit his tongue. He'd overseen this store for years, had walked these floors in suits that cost more than Hannah made in a month. But now he was invisible, exactly as planned. Nate found him by the espresso machine. You're the new floater. Okay, don't touch the keys. Don't speak unless I ask. Just shadow and learn. Got it. Nate didn't ask his name, didn't look him in the eye. Instead, he pointed at a young black couple looking at a mid-range BMW. Don't bother with them, Nate muttered. They always ask questions, test drive, then walk out. Calvin froze. How do you know that, just do? You'll learn. The couple walked out 10 minutes later, unassisted, unacknowledged. Calvin watched them go, then turned to Nate. Don't you think we should have said something? Relax, man. We don't have time for browsers. Go check the inventory sheet. Later that afternoon, a white man in a tailored suit walked in. Nate straightened up. Welcome, sir. Can I get you an espresso water? We've got a few M models in today. The transformation was instant. Calvin felt it in his stomach. For years, he'd looked at performance metrics units sold ticket size close ratio. Now he was seeing the mechanics behind the numbers, and it sickened him. At lunch, he sat alone in the back lounge. A Latina technician walked in, sat across from him. You new, yeah? Calvin. I'm Inez. I've been here 8 years. Don't let them eat you alive. Thanks. They still think I can't handle diagnostics. Been AS certified longer than Nate's been shaving. She laughed bitterly. You one of the interns. Calvin paused. Something like that. Well, keep your head down. This place eats nice people. That night, back at his hotel, Calvin didn't sleep. He played back the footage from the day recorded discreetly on his wearable pin cam as required by Frontline Reset protocol. He saw himself being ignored, watched his own frustration mount, felt the sting of assumptions. He saw Nate mutter a slur when a black teen walked in with his white girlfriend. Saw Hannah ignore a woman in a hijab for 10 full minutes while chatting with another guest. This was his district, his numbers, his silence. He didn't just inherit this culture, he'd allowed it to fester. The next morning, Amari called. Well, it's worse than I thought. Ready to tell the board that I want to do more than tell them. I'm listening. I want to be reassigned. Amari blinked. What? Put me back on the floor. Permanently. I can't lead people I don't understand. You're serious. Dead. Then you've passed your first real test. Calvin nodded, eyes tired but clear. I finally saw them. The customers, the workers, the bias, and I saw myself. That's the beginning, Amari said quietly. Welcome to the rebuild. The doors to the Thompson Automotive Executive Boardroom swung shut with a soft hiss, locking in 12 of the company's most powerful people and one woman who now held all the cards. Zora stood at the head of the long glass table. Her reflection in the polished surface stared back, sharp, composed, unflinching. To her left sat Amari, flanked by 2 members of the new Culture and Equity Division. To her right, Robert Chen, looking more pale than usual. Across from her the board, men and women in dark suits, some curious, some tense, and one Jonathan Eastman chair of the board, clearly angry. Zora clicked the remote. Behind her, the 110-inch screen came alive. Operation Mirror. Board briefing, slide 1, customer loss due to discriminatory incidents. 2019, 2024. Red bar after red bar. Millions in lost revenue. Slide 2, legal exposure. Active risk analysis. 17 potential class action triggers. 4 whistleblower alerts. 3 equal opportunity violations under internal review. Murmurs spread. Someone cleared their throat. Jonathan raised a hand. Zora, we've reviewed the packet. The numbers are troubling. Yes, not troubling. Self-inflicted. She clicked again. Slide 3 clips from Hidden Cam. Culver City dealership. The room fell silent. There was Nate muttering to Calvin, "Don't waste time on them." There was Hannah rolling her eyes at a customer in a headscarf. There was Calvin, one of their own, ignored, dismissed, belittled. Jonathan shifted in his seat. That video, how was it obtained? Frontline reset, Amari said clearly. Executive immersion. You approved the budget 6 weeks ago. We didn't know it included covert filming, which is why it worked. Zora stepped forward. I have enough footage, testimony, and customer data to bury this company in federal court for 5 years, but that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to save it. Silence. Then Jonathan leaned back, folding his hands. Zora? This is all very noble. You've clearly invested your soul into this. But we have shareholders, investors, a brand to protect. Zora raised an eyebrow. And what protects a brand better than truth? Jonathan smiled thinly. Optics matter. So does leadership image. There are some who feel, perhaps rightly, that this scandal, while handled with integrity, has still tarnished your position. The temperature in the room dropped. Are you suggesting I step down? We're merely exploring whether a transition might restore external confidence. To be clear, Zora said, voice steel. I expose rot in our culture, launch reforms, regain public trust, and your solution is replace me, Zora. You think I'm the liability, not the racism, not the silence, not the arrogance. She took a step forward. Let me tell you something about image, Jonathan. I spent 20 years polishing this brand until it gleamed. I built it on excellence and inclusion. We catered to rappers and retirees. We served Hollywood and Harlem. And for years you applauded me, as long as I didn't rock the boat. But now that I've exposed the water's been poisoned, you want me to step off the ship. You're not protecting the brand. You're protecting a lie. The room was dead quiet. Then Robert Chen, quiet, until now, spoke. If Zora goes, I go. Others murmured agreement. Amari leaned forward. You don't fix infection by firing the surgeon. Zora let the silence hang, then clicked to the final slide. Frontline reset. Phase 2 national expansion. 17 cities. 1 unified code. No opt-outs. You want confidence, she said. Let's be the first automotive company in America to publish our internal equity metrics quarterly. Customer ratings. Diversity audits. Anonymous staff evaluations. Not to look perfect, but to prove we care when we're not. One of the oldest board members who hadn't spoken all meeting finally did. What will that cost us more than silence? Zora said, but less than ignorance. Jonathan's mouth twitched. He knew he'd lost. Very well, he said quietly. Proceed. Zora closed her laptop. Good, because I wasn't asking permission. By dawn the next morning, it was everywhere. CNBC, Bloomberg, the Shade Room. The hashtags were trending before Zora had even gotten out of bed. CEO Undercover Thompson reset. Discrimination on the lot news anchors were calling it the boldest internal takedown in corporate retail history, but with praise came fire. Within 24 hours, more than 200 news outlets had picked up the story. Some hailed Zora as a visionary. Others accused her of orchestrating a media stunt to boost stock. Blogs questioned her motives. Podcasts debated her leadership style. And cable news, they were foaming at the mouth. Fox Business ran a chyron CEO weaponizes race to gain control. An anonymous source claimed Zora had been plotting the power grab for months. Zora didn't flinch. She expected this. It was part of the storm. But even she was caught off guard when Cameron Briggs, host of the primetime show Capital Conflict, reached out personally. His reputation? Sharp. Unforgiving. He chewed up CEOs like morning toast. "Ms. Thompson, come on my show tonight," he said via voicemail. "No scripts, no PR buffers, just you, me, and the truth." Her team said no. Zora said yes. 8:00 p.m. Live broadcast. Cameron sat poised, tie crisp pen in hand. Tonight we are joined by Zora Thompson, CEO whistleblower, and some say power player behind the most controversial reform campaign in luxury retail this year. Zora sat calm. No notes, no makeup team. Just her in a navy suit and the same expression she wore in boardroom's readiness. Cameron didn't waste time. "You ran a sting operation against your own employees. You filmed them without consent. You embarrassed your board. Some say you've made yourself bigger than the brand." "What do you say to that?" Zora didn't blink. "I say if exposing discrimination embarrasses your brand, you were never a brand worth protecting." Cameron's eyebrow arched. "That sounds righteous. But let's talk numbers. Stock dipped 12%. Lawsuits are mounting. You've lost partnerships. What's the cost of being morally correct?" Zora folded her hands. "The cost of silence was higher. Elaborate. We've spent millions advertising luxury while ignoring the experience of buying it. What good is a polished showroom if the people walking in are being profiled by their skin? So you believe this wasn't isolated?" "No. You believe racism is embedded in your company. I believe it's embedded in every institution that hasn't actively worked to remove it." The room went quiet. Even Cameron blinked at that one. "So what's the endgame here, Ms. Thompson?" "You fire some racists, make headlines." Then what rebrand Zora's voice was low but steady. "The endgame is that one day a black teenager in sneakers walks into a showroom and gets the same respect as a man in a Rolex. That's not rebranding, that's rewiring." The control room was dead silent. Cameron leaned back. "There are those who say this whole campaign is about ego, about you, that this isn't about justice, it's about control." Zora looked straight at the camera. "If doing the right thing looks like control to you, maybe that says more about how little control the right thing usually gets." That line hit hard. A few seconds of dead air. Then a slow, unexpected thing happened. Cameron Briggs nodded. "Well," he said finally, "that's the most honest answer I've heard on this show in 2 years. He turned to camera 2. "America, we just met a CEO who doesn't flinch." Backstage, Zora exhaled. Sarah handed her a phone. "You're going to want to see this." Her screen lit up with messages. One from a former executive who'd once ghosted her after a merger. "Saw the segment. If you ever run for office, I'll be first in line." Another from her alma mater. "We'd like to offer you an honorary doctorate in ethical leadership." And then an anonymous email. No name, no greeting. "I watched the interview with my 10-year-old daughter. She wants to be a CEO now. Thank you for showing her how." Zora stared at that message the longest, because that was the point. The headlines had cooled. The storm on social media had become a tide of support. But inside Thompson Automotive Group, a different battle was just beginning. The battle for the soul of the company. Zora sat in a quiet, glass-walled meeting room. Across from her were 6 men and women who had been with her since the early days. Regional managers, legacy executives, people who had helped her build the empire. People she had once called family. They looked tense, defensive. Behind Zora stood Amari and 2 culture officers with thick folders. This wasn't just a check-in. This was Judgment Day. Zora began calmly. "We're not here to talk about sales. We're here to talk about survival." Silence. She continued. "Over the past 6 weeks, we've conducted 42 culture audits, 112 anonymous interviews, reviewed over 200 customer incidents. What we found wasn't just negligence, it was resistance." She slid a document across the table. It was a report titled Legacy Leadership Blind Spots, Behavioral Risk Summary. Each manager saw their name bolded in black ink. Zora didn't let the pause linger. What I'm offering today isn't punishment. It's a mirror. Amari stood next. Some of you were good at selling cars. Some of you were great at growing teams. But somewhere along the way, protecting your status became more important than protecting our people. She opened the first folder. Tony, multiple reports of dismissing concerns from female sales reps. D&I training logged as incomplete for 3 quarters. Tony flinched. Zora didn't look away. Amari opened the next. Janice 5 unresolved complaints tied to how BIPOC customers were pre-qualified. One whistleblower said you referred to customers by code C2s for people you didn't think could afford luxury. Janice went pale. The room grew heavy. Amari closed the folder. Zora stepped forward. I loved you all like siblings. We built something rare. But love doesn't excuse damage. Here's the choice. She placed 2 envelopes on the table in front of each executive. One was white. One was red. White means you commit. Full cultural retraining. Public accountability. You become students again. Red means you walk. No NDAs, no gag orders. But no return. No one moved. Then Tony, the oldest of them, picked up the white envelope. I didn't see it. But I want to now. Next came Marisol, then Deepak, until only Janice and Harold remained. Janice stared at both envelopes, then picked the red one. I helped you build this brand. I won't be lectured by kids with buzzwords. Zora nodded. Then you helped build the problem too. Harold followed suit silently. The 2 stood. Before they left, Zora spoke again. You're not villains, but you became comfortable in a system that protected you while others were punished. That ends here. Janice didn't reply, but her eyes said it all. Wounded pride and fear. Outside the room, Amari exhaled. That's 6 more down. 6 more roots pulled, Zora replied. In the following week, the company newsletter made headlines again. Legacy program dissolved. New leadership development built from ground zero. Amari launched a new initiative. Reseed, Re-Educate Survey. Engage and Force Diversify. Every manager, every department head, every tenured lead required to undergo 60-day cultural rehabilitation. And if they refuse, someone asked at orientation, they're refusing alignment, Amari said, and this garden doesn't need weeds. At the Culver City branch, Nate, the smug salesman who had dismissed Calvin, was replaced by a 28-year-old rising star from Detroit. Her name was Simone Clark. She'd worked the floor, faced the same biases, rose by performance, not connections. We're not selling cars anymore, she told her team. We're selling experiences. Respect is part of the package. Across California, posters went up in every dealership. Respect. Regardless. Character sells. And in the break rooms on every coffee station, you never know who's watching. Treat every customer like they sign your check. Because sometimes they did. For the first time in 22 years, Thompson Automotive shut down for 1 full business day. No test drives, no showroom tours, no deals closed. Instead, across 12 locations, over 800 employees sat in chairs facing forward. Screens lit up, and one word appeared on every single one: reset. Amari Caldwell stood at the front of the Beverly Hills flagship, holding a manila folder labeled HR Legacy Guidelines, 2004-2024. She didn't start with a speech. She held the folder up. This, she said, is what trained some of you. This built the culture you just watched collapse. She paused. This rewarded quotas, not questions. This made it easier to ignore a woman's voice if it wasn't loud. This taught us to profile customers quietly so we could hit monthly targets. A few people shifted in their seats. She opened the folder, slowly page after page of outdated protocol scripts templates. Then, without warning, Amari dropped it into a steel bin and lit a match. The fire was small contained, but no less symbolic. Gasps rippled across the crowd. Then silence. Then applause. Thunderous, spontaneous, from staff who had stayed silent for years. This isn't a training, Amari continued. It's a funeral. We're burying a culture that should have died a long time ago. Back upstairs, Zora watched it all on the live internal feed. She said nothing, but her hand resting on the armrest curled into a quiet fist. The rebuild had begun, and it was working. In the weeks that followed, transformation took root. New employee handbooks arrived, not 80 pages of legalese, but a living document titled How We Treat Humans. It began with 3 words: "We see you." Every employee, new and old, had to complete a bias impact assessment, not just multiple choice. It included scenario simulations using VR headsets, voice recognition empathy scores, and real-time customer emotion response tracking. This isn't sensitivity training, Amari told a skeptical manager. It's systems retraining. Managers no longer received bonuses based on sales alone. Now ethical service metrics carried equal weight. Mistreatment costly. Microaggressions tracked. Every customer feedback survey included 3 new questions. Did you feel seen? Did you feel safe? Would you trust us again? If the answer was no, it triggered an automatic case review, no exceptions. Zora made her presence felt in unexpected ways. She began silent tours, unannounced visits to random dealerships dressed in neutral tones, walking the floor without security. She wasn't there to inspect. She was there to observe. Leadership isn't telling people how to act. She told her assistant, Sarah, it's watching how they behave when you say nothing at all. In Oakland, she watched a 19-year-old trainee named Malik handle a difficult customer with patience and respect. She pulled him aside after and said only, "You'll run this place in 5 years." He cried in the break room. In Orange County, she saw a middle-aged receptionist address a hijabi customer by name without hesitation or awkwardness. Zora sent her a handwritten thank you card. Inside it read, "You proved kindness doesn't need training. It just needs permission." But not everyone embraced the change. Some old guard employees called it too much. One sales veteran complained in an all-hands, "I sell cars, not sociology." Amari replied with a single sentence, "Then maybe you're in the wrong business." There were exits, voluntary, quiet, and necessary. But there were also returns. Employees who had left years ago, fed up with bias, now asked to come back. One woman wrote, "I never thought I'd walk these halls again. You made them feel safe." Then came the day Zora received a letter. It was short, from a former customer named Jennifer, the same woman who had almost walked away from the BMW humiliated. It read, "My experience that day crushed me. But seeing what you built afterward, that healed more than I can explain. Thank you for proving that people don't have to stay broken." Zora closed the letter. No response needed, because that letter said it all. The rebuild wasn't just changing a company. It was changing what customers expected from every business in America. It started with an article in Forbes, "Thompson Automotive's Reset. Brilliant or dangerous?" The journalist didn't pick a side, but the world did. Inside dealerships across the country, things were shifting. At Redwood Motors, a competitor sales managers quietly downloaded Thompson's new handbook, How We Treat Humans, and passed it around in WhatsApp groups. At Lexington Automotive, a senior VP ordered a full audit after 3 ex-Thompson employees brought reseed principles with them. And then came the backlash, not from customers, from competitors. One morning, Zora's phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. "You need to see this." She opened the link to a CNBC clip. Robert Langston, CEO of Meridian Motor Group, one of the oldest luxury chains in the country, was sitting across from an anchor. "Look," he said, smoothing his tie. "Zora Thompson runs a fine company, but let's not pretend retail is therapy. We're here to sell cars, not hold hands." The anchor blinked. "But don't you think I think empathy doesn't close deals? And if she wants to run a social experiment instead of a dealership, that's her choice. We'll keep our eyes on the numbers." Zora didn't blink, didn't frown. She just smiled. because that moment, that smug arrogance, was exactly what she'd been waiting for. 2 days later, Zora announced a press conference. No warning, no leaks, just a simple post on social media. "You asked if we're a social experiment. Let's test the market." The room was packed. Reporters, analysts, former critics. Zora stepped to the podium wearing a gray suit, no jewelry, no flair, just confidence. Behind her, the screen read, "Thompson Automotive. Public release Q2. Ethics-informed earnings." She paused. Robert Langston thinks empathy doesn't close deals. So let's look at the data. Slide 1, customer retention year over year, plus 19%. Slide 2, new customer referrals, SARS, 41%. Slide 3, employee exit rate down, 37%. Then the final slide. Net revenue Q2, $417 million, highest in company history. The room gasped. Zora didn't smile. She just said, "Turns out respect doesn't lose money. It earns loyalty." Mic drop. Within hours, the press exploded. Zora Thompson shuts down critics with numbers. Bloomberg Empathy pays Thompson's record quarter. Business Insider. Langston tried to walk back his words, but it was too late. The video of his quote paired with Zora's slide deck went viral. On TikTok, creators posted duets. One side Langston's smirk, other side $417 million. Empathy earns trended for 3 days straight, but the impact went deeper. At a government small business summit, Zora was invited to speak about corporate ethics as competitive advantage. In the crowd sat underdog CEOs, franchise owners, and new founders. She told them, "Culture isn't just PR, it's profit insurance. You can't market your way out of who you really are." Applause, standing ovation. One founder whispered to another, "We're changing our onboarding Monday." A week later, something unexpected arrived in Zora's inbox, a formal letter. Stamped with the emblem of the National Automotive Standards Council. Inside proposal, Zora Thompson, Advisory Chair on Consumer Equity Standards 2026. They wanted her to help write national guidelines on how dealerships treat customers. It was voluntary. Symbolic, maybe, but historic. Amari read the letter and smiled. From thrown out of a dealership to setting the rules for all of them, Zora finished. And then another ripple. Meridian Motor Group issued a quiet internal memo, begin soft rollout of customer courtesy standards based on tag model. Langston didn't say it publicly, but he'd blinked. The shift had begun. A year had passed since that day in the showroom. The headlines had faded. The lawsuits settled. The industry changed. But Zora's eyes were fixed on something bigger. Legacy, not just in business, but in people. The first ripple came quietly. A school in Detroit renamed their business academy the Zora Thompson Institute of Ethical Leadership. Then a university in Atlanta added a course rebuilding from within the Thompson method. Her speeches were studied in MBA classrooms. One professor described her as the Rosa Parks of boardroom reform. Zora hated that comparison, not because it wasn't an honor, but because, as she often said, "I didn't start a revolution. I just refused to let disrespect sit in the driver's seat." She launched a mentorship program called Ignite, focused on high school girls of color who wanted to lead, not just in business, but in whatever room the world told them they didn't belong. Amari oversaw the first cohort, 12 girls, all different, all brilliant, each one paired with a woman from Thompson's executive team. Their first assignment: shadow a dealership, not to learn how to sell, but to observe how dignity moves through a room. Then came the moment Zora had waited for. Back in Detroit. Back in the same auditorium where she had once sat as a 17-year-old girl watching a guest speaker she no longer remembered, except for one phrase: "Success is for those who blend in." That line had haunted her, because Zora had never blended in. And now, standing on the stage she once sat below, she looked out at 400 young faces, most of them black, most of them girls, some nervous, some bold, all watching her like she might be proof. She began quietly. When I was your age, I thought power lived in suits, in big cars, big titles, big buildings. But it doesn't. Power lives in how you treat the person who can't do anything for you. She scanned the crowd. You don't need permission to lead. You don't need approval to be worthy. A girl in the second row raised her hand. Her name tag said Maya. Ms. Thompson, she asked softly, how did you know you could do all this? Zora paused, and for a moment the auditorium was completely still. Then she stepped down from the stage and walked to Maya. Kneeling in front of her, she said, I didn't know. I was told I couldn't. Shown I shouldn't. Expected to stay small. But one day I stopped asking if I could. I decided I would. The room exhaled. Maya smiled. Zora stood, her voice rising just enough to reach the back row. There will be rooms that make you feel invisible. Walk in anyway. There will be people who try to test your worth. Let them. Because when you pass their test, you rewrite their rules. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was hope-breaking loose. That night, Zora sat in her car outside the school. No cameras, no press, just her thinking. Sarah texted, your old high school trending on TikTok. Walk in anyway. Clips gone viral. Zora chuckled. Finally, she typed back something worth going viral for. Back in Beverly Hills, Amari reviewed applications. More than 5,000 girls had applied for the next Ignite cycle. Some from foster homes, some from refugee camps, one from a juvenile detention program, all inspired by a woman who'd once been told she didn't belong in her own building. And then a call came in, from the White House, an invitation to the Presidential Roundtable on Corporate Accountability and Equity, the same administration that once ignored her emails. Now asking her to help write national inclusion frameworks. Zora didn't celebrate. She nodded once and said simply, book the flight. 2 months later, Zora stood at the glass balcony of her top-floor office overlooking Los Angeles. Below her Life Pulse dealerships, humming mentorships, blooming audits transforming. Inside the office, a letter sat on her desk. Not just any letter. An offer. The National Automotive Consortium had nominated her as their incoming chairperson, the first woman of color ever considered. The role came with prestige, power, a salary bigger than most entire marketing divisions. But Zora just stared at it. That evening, Amari walked in. You're going to accept, right? Zora smiled, slow and knowing. What if I don't? Amari blinked. Zora, you'd be rewriting history again. Exactly, Zora replied. Maybe rewriting history means knowing when to hand over the pen. She turned the letter over. I've taught them how to build. Now they need to build without watching me first. Amari sat stunned. So, what are you going to do? Zora didn't hesitate. Give someone else the mic. The next day, Thompson Automotive held a company-wide live stream. Every employee tuned in. Zora appeared on screen wearing a soft blue blazer and a quiet smile. Today isn't about a goodbye. It's about legacy. She paused. Legacy isn't what you build when you're in the room. It's what stands when you're no longer there. She continued. We've walked through fire together. We've burned down broken systems, and we've planted something better. Now I want to see it grow. Amari stepped into frame beside her. Zora placed a keycard in her hand. This, she said, is yours now. Applause erupted across locations. Some cried. Most stood. Because everyone watching knew a new chapter had just begun, and Zora wasn't leaving in defeat. She was leaving in triumph. That night, Zora took a walk through the Culver City dealership, the same one where it all began. She passed a young salesman offering water to a couple in sweats. No Rolexes, no designer bags, but they were being treated like VIPs. She smiled and kept walking. Outside, a young girl was sitting on the curb, flipping through a worn notebook. Zora paused. Waiting for someone, she asked. The girl looked up. Yeah, my mom works here. I'm doing my homework. Zora noticed the heading on the page. What makes a good leader? Want a secret? Zora asked. The girl nodded. Zora leaned down. A good leader knows when to speak. A great leader knows when to listen. But the best leaders? They build something so strong it keeps going even after they step aside. The girl smiled. Zora winked. Tell your mom she's doing something incredible. Then she walked off into the night. Not toward another boardroom. Not toward more power. But toward peace. Because the war had been fought. And the victory. It was already growing in the next generation. Zora Thompson had walked into her dealership to test her employees. She had been judged, dismissed, humiliated. But she never raised her voice, never retaliated with rage. She answered ignorance with integrity. She responded to discrimination with transformation. And in the end, she built a company that sold more than cars. It sold dignity. Today, at Thompson Automotive. Customers still walk through the doors in old jeans, worn sneakers, and second-hand dreams. And they are seen, heard, served, because one woman decided enough was enough. She didn't wait for the world to change. She became the change. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch more gripping stories like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.